Always great catching up with the general of Syndicate MMA. Coach John Wood, of course, is helping Merab Dvalishvili get ready for his title defense at UFC 316 on June 7th. John, how's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going great. Thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it. Everything's good, man. Just full gear, full steam ahead. Lots of big fights, lots of big camps going
Yeah.
on. So busy as usual.
Always busy. And you like coming back here because we'll talk some hockey at the end. You got the Golden Knights shirt
Of
on.
course.
If people aren't aware, they're playing tonight. We'll talk about that at the end for sure. But let's start with Merab. I think most people felt like after the fight with Umar that O'Malley was going to be next. Were there any other talks about opponents, or was it always O'Malley and it was just a matter of what date would work out best?
I mean, obviously, Jan's name came up, and that's a fight that obviously we know we're going to get back or have to go do again eventually. But he was really the only one that made sense, with Sandhagen and Figueiredo fighting. Jan's next man up. So figured it would be between Jan and O'Malley. O'Malley was the name we heard pretty early on. And obviously, with his star power and his draw, you start hearing those kind of things, and he was talking about it. We kind of knew that was the way it was gonna go.
Did you get a lot of notice? Like, when was it confirmed that you would be fighting him and how long of a camp? I know Merab's training all the time, but it's obviously different once you have the date and everything lined up.
Yeah, we actually had plenty of notice for this one. I mean, we had a good 10, 12 weeks. Like I said, right after the fact, we had already kind of heard rumblings, and we'd heard rumblings from the higher ups. So we knew it was happening. So we've been preparing for him for, a good 10 weeks at least. And again, like you just said, Merab's always in camp, so he's never not training. He's never not training like he's not in camp. The dude is just always firing on all cylinders. He's all go go go. So it doesn't matter really who or when. He's going to be in shape. And but yeah, it was nice to have a full camp as opposed to the Umar fight where we kind of got thrown into that one, and we had a lot of injuries and a lot of bad things going on in that one. But thankfully we got that done.
Yeah.
So it's been nice.
Yeah, and he can use the PI, right? There's no issues about him not being allowed in there too, right? So that's a little bit different for this for this camp, which is great. I know Merab is probably the last fighter you need to like motivate to get up for a fight or anything. If anything, you're probably telling him like, hey, we got to take a break here. You can't overdo it. But he did beat O'Malley pretty decisively, I thought, in the last fight. I know there's some narrative out there that the fight was close. I don't think it was. But like, how do you keep him in that mindset of like not overthinking it or being overconfident, like keeping the eye on the prize, especially with how dominant he was in that first fight?
Yeah, that's part of my job, is to make sure for any fighter that if you're on a good streak, and especially Merab being the champion, and now it looks like we're going to have quite a few rematches on the horizon, is making sure that we don't take anything lightly, and that's something that Merab doesn't need. He doesn't need the motivation for that. In fact, the first thing he came is like, Coach, we've got to make sure that, I want this more. I want to train harder, train me harder. He was very motivated to make sure that we didn't skip anything because we've been in there before, and we can't. That's part of the element, the surprise is when people get in there with Merab, they've never felt that kind of pace, that power, that veracity that he brings to the fight. So now O'Malley has, and there's some things that he had success with and some things that we've done, and it's my job to go in there and figure out, okay, if I'm his coaches, if I'm O'Malley, or and I'm Tim, here's what we're going after. Here's what we're going to try to do. And now I've got to kind of work back and make sure that we close up those holes. And Merab is an extremely smart fighter, and he's extremely intelligent. His MMA IQ is getting better every day. So, it's really not hard to get him to switch gears to, okay, this is what's going to happen. Here's what I think they're going to do. And if they don't do it, then here's what we're doing. We always focus on us. We always focus on our job first, and making sure that we are the most important fighter in that fight. We're not over game planning to, oh my God, Sean could do this or Sean could do that, and whatever happens, he's ready for. We train for a full MMA fight. If Sean wants to come out and grapple, if Sean wants to come out and kick us in the body a little bit more and try to set up head kicks off of it and see whatever, because he thinks he had success with the one kick or whatever, great, we'll be ready for it. Anything that happens, if he's going to try to jump guillotines, do whatever, we're set for anything that they could bring. I don't think there'll be any, crazy new wrinkles. And I think, again, after the first, second round, it'll be a Merab Dvalishvili fight with a couple added little extras in there.
Now for camp, because you guys won last time, like I don't imagine you want to change too much of it. You know, the old saying, if it ain't broken, don't try and fix it, so to speak. So who is he working with? Take me through sort of how camp has looked leading into this fight as far as training partners and all that stuff.
Again, the same thing on that principle. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, their version was broke, and it didn't work. So I imagine they're going to come out with some different stuff.
Hmm.
If they come out and do the same thing, we're ready. I mean, that's it. That's an easy night at the office. If they come out, they're going to try to change and do some things. And like I said, I have my ideas of what I think that would be. I always go back and work it backwards. If I was coaching against my fighter, what would I have them do? Especially when we already have a fight on the books that we can watch as a rematch. It's beautiful. So we brought in some of the same guys, the same looks that we had from the first camp, and we added a bunch of new ones, and the craziness that is going on right now in camp. It's very cliche to say that, it's the best he's ever looked. I've never seen him in the shape that he's in. I've never seen him as motivated as he's motivated. Like, he really wants to hold on to that belt for the long haul, for the long period. He wants to break records with it. So he is so motivated and putting in more work than I've ever seen him, his striking, his submissions. I've already gone on plenty of interviews and said, our goal now is to go back and finish these fights, and if not, obviously Sean's a very, very skilled and tough fighter. He's one of the best in the world. He was a champion for a reason. So going out there and saying, "Hey, we're going to go out there and just maul him and finish him," would be a stupid thing to say. But the thing that I think you're going to see now is Merab confident in looking for finishes. Merab confident looking to get a knockout. And if not, so be it. But it's not going to be for lack of trying. So we've added some new things. We've added a ton of, fortunately, we've got one of the deepest rooms and at 25, 35, 45 in the world right now. So there is no lack of training partners, and man, they are pushing him and he is pushing them, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
Love it. Without giving away the game plan, obviously, how's the rematch playing out? How do you see it going down?
I think it's going to be a much more violent fight. I think you're going to see Sean come out with a much more damaged look, whether we get the finish or not. And I think there is a strong potential for that to happen. But I think you're going to start seeing a lot of damage on these fighters coming through. I think you're going to see a lot of bumps and bruises and cuts and blood. But that being said, Sean is, like I said, he's one of the best fighters in the world. He's got a great coach in Tim. I think that they'll be prepared better, and he said he wasn't healthy in the first fight. He only had one hip, and now he's got two hips. I hope he has three or four hips because he's going to need them. But he it's going to be a rough night for him, and I do see us coming out with our hand raised, whether it's a finish or it's a 5-round dominant decision.
It looks like Cory Sandhagen's going to be next, I would think, just with the timing. Obviously, I think Umar needs another fight, and he's on the shelf right now anyways. Is that sort of your understanding that Sandhagen will be next, or do you think there could be any other opponents in the mix?
I mean, it makes sense. Being
fresh
the only
matchup
guy
too.
that,
Fresh matchup too.
yeah,
Right? So,
being the only guy that we haven't fought, it makes sense for that to be the next matchup. I also think that what makes the most realistic sense is have Jan and Cory fight for the number one contender, because Jan's been doing it, and doing it at a high level, and he looks great lately. And I think those two guys would be an awesome, rematch. And I think that really is the spot for the number one contender. That's what you would say on the books should happen, but the UFC always has the idea of, they know how to do it, and they do. They always, they always come out on top with great fights. And we've seen this before. In fact, we've been in that position before with, Pereira, where Khalil was kind of the last man standing, and we jumped up and had a great fight. And I think that is, it's one of those two for sure. In my book, I think those two should fight for the number one contendership, but I think that either one's a great fight.
Yeah, well said. I'm sure you watched 315 this past weekend. What did you think of Jack Della Maddalena winning the title over Belal? Very impressive victory.
Man, that was great. Jack looked awesome, gritty, tough, great performance. Went out there with a great game plan, executed it. I think that maybe Belal kind of got a little bit too carried away in the ego sense of, the Canelo hands. I'm not going to shoot a takedown. I'm not going to do this, and maybe went in. I don't know, but like with the wrong mindset of do what you do that got you that title. Don't go away from that until you need to. I understand going out there and trying to entertain the crowd and trying to throw and do this and do that. And I'm not saying that wasn't the game plan and maybe Jack just stopped him, but it just seemed like, sometimes guys get caught up in this whole thing, but stick with what's successful. That guy is such a crazy hard grinder. And I know you want to get the fans and the people on your side, but what's better is that paycheck,
Mm,
and
mm.
and getting those two paychecks and getting that walking away with that belt. So, I'm not saying that that's exactly what happened, but I feel like he kind of got carried away. Jack came in with a great game plan, and it was just a night that a very entertaining fight. It turned out to be a great fight. I think that it's kind of one of those losses where Belal might have his credit might have actually gone up for fighting the fight he did fight. I don't think it was the smart fight to necessarily walk away with that title, but also kudos to Jack and his team. Man, they looked great. And that kid's he's fun to watch.
Does he beat Islam Makhachev? That seems like the next fight.
You know, we got to see Islam at 170. It might be one of those things where he goes up, and because he's not having such a crazy weight cut, that he's even better and
Mm.
even stronger. He is a huge, huge lightweight. So I think he's going to be a decent sized welterweight. But you always have that factor. He might feel better, he might be better, but now he's got to fight bigger guys that are used to fighting that size of a man and not being dominated. So it really does uh, create some interest on how that happens. I just don't know until we get in there, until he gets in there and see how he performs and see how he does with bigger guys. But Jack just fought a very kind of like same style, same version of a guy.
Mm.
I think Islam will obviously, throw hands, but I think he's going to be shooting those takedowns a lot more and will get him down. And we'll see what kind of efficiency he has. But I don't know. I don't know how to read that one until, because obviously I'm sure he's trained with a lot of bigger guys, but being in there in a fight with a weight class up, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So it's an interesting one.
It looks like Ilia Topuria is going to fight Charles Oliveira, I would think, because I mean Arman should be next, but we know the UFC's kind of putting him to the side with what happened at 311, which I think is unfortunate. But could Charles do it, or do you think Ilia, just with his knockout power, could clip Charles and get the win there? Who would you lean?
You got to go with Ilia on that one. He just has, Charles is a fantastic fighter. He's getting a little up there in the age and wear and tear. He's definitely not, I'm going to say, on the downside of anything yet, but Ilia is still very much on the come up. Again, we're talking about somebody coming up a weight class. Is Ilia going to, you know, have problems with the size? I think his power is only going to get better, and I think his skill set for this fight is going to be just fine in being able to handle what Charles brings. We've seen, Oliveira have tendencies to get touched in fights. And I think that if you're in there with somebody like Ilia and he touches you a few times, it's going to be night night. So I would lean more to Ilia on this one for sure. I think it's stylistically a great matchup for him. And I think he comes out on top on that one.
The other big fight on 315 was Valentina Shevchenko defending her title against Manon Fiorot, and I think a lot of people want to see Weili Zhang against Valentina next. Have you spoken to Weili recently? I believe her last camp she did at home, but it seems like that's a fight that people want to put together. What is there? You got any insight? Because I think fans want to see that fight next.
I can definitely tell you that was the plan. All along was to go up and fight for the title of
Mm-hmm.
whoever the winner from Noche
315.
was, yeah, or whatever that, I think it was, yeah, whatever Noche was, whatever that one, whoever won that fight was who she was basically really looking to fight. And I know Grasso she had the title, so she had already kind of agreed to it. Obviously she lost, and Valentina got hurt, so we weren't able to make that one happen. But I know that is definitely what Weili wants. I think she's earned it. I think that, as you get older as a fighter and the more and more you do this, the weight cut sucks. And I really wish that weight cutting wasn't such a big part of the sport, but everybody does it. And so everybody would have to stop doing it and kind of make it a gentleman's agreement. Hey, we're not cutting weight anymore. We're going to fight at our own walk around weight, which would be such a smarter, easier, healthier, deal for everybody. But that's just not going to happen. So I think, Weili is kind of tired of making the weight. I think she is such a solid little, she's just she's all muscle. She's always in shape. I think that weight cut's getting less fun. I think she wants to go up and challenge herself, and I think that's a fight. That's a legend fight. You know, that's a
Yeah.
fight that who doesn't want to see that one. So I would love to see that next. You know, I've chatted back and forth with her here recently, but we haven't talked about that fight. But you know, I know that that's something that she wanted for sure previously. So I don't see why I wouldn't want to beat now.
Okay, we got to talk about the Golden Knights. You got the shirt on. I am rooting for the Golden Knights, obviously, because I don't like the Oilers. But even if I wasn't, I've always liked the Knights. They got good crowds, good uniform, whatever.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that Calvin Pickard was day to day, I'm like, this could change the series. You guys won the last game with literally a second left. How are you feeling going into tonight? Do you think they can win the series?
Man, I think we got robbed in game two.
Yeah,
I think
that call was brutal.
that non-call, and you know there was two non-calls, a tripping call that got one of our guys hurt, another call with a high stick on Eichel. I think it was a horseshit game that I think we were on our way to win until the refs tried to step in and take that one away from us. Um, but ultimately, you know, I think the momentum was swinging that way. Oilers are a tough team, and they have two of the best guys in the league on their team. You know, so they're always there, but you know, in the previous, you know, games and series, we always seem to come out on top with the Oilers. And obviously, I believe that we're going to pull it through. I think we're going to go in there and we're going to beat them again tonight, and we're going to come home and we're going to win it. You know, it potentially, obviously, I think it's going to go game seven. I think we win it in game seven. Tough series, but I think we're going to have their number.
Okay, we'll have to check back on the prediction. Might have to call you Mystic Wood if it ends up working out there, Coach. Appreciate the time as always. Anything you want to mention before we get out of here? Syndicate MMA, anything else you got going on? I'll give you the last word.
We got Luana Santos fighting this weekend. Make sure you check that fight out. And then obviously, you know, we got Merab and Khalil coming up on some big main events. So just everybody tune in and watch some good fights.